A media release from the Democratic Alliance alerted my attention again. I mean, it's not as if this is a new thing. It is a crisis in teenage pregnancy, which has again been emphasized by the latest statistics released by the relevant government department for the first 3 quarters of 2024. And what those figures say is that the total number of teenagers giving birth between 10 and the ages of 10 and 14 in the first quarter, 429, 683 in the second quarter, and 312 in the fourth quarter. I beg your pardon, first, second, and third quarter. So that's close to 1,500 girls between 10 and 14 delivering babies in official health facilities. I mean, I don't know whether there would be more that had done so at home or somewhere else. Between 15 and 19, it's 20,000, just over 20,000 in the first quarter, 30,000 in the second quarter, and close to 17,000 in the third quarter. So that is approaching 60,000 pregnancies in that age group. We are joined now by Karabo Ozah, Director of the Centre for Child Law. Karabo, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, John. Thank you for having me on your show.
As I say, this is not something new to us. These kinds of figures have been around for a while, but it does look as if there is an upward trend, slight from the graphs that I was able to access, but it's there. So whatever interventions are in place to try and sort it out, for the moment, don't seem to be working.
Certainly. So I think that's one of the questions we should be asking. I think just post-COVID, we had alarming kind of rates that were reported, and there was an undertaking from the Ministry of Education that steps will be taken in relation to looking into the cases, but also steps need to be taken in relation to, the educative and preventative approaches. So that's one leg of it. What are we doing in relation to educating learners about sexual and reproductive health rights and access to contraceptives? But that only really matters for children who can consent to sexual activity. If you're talking about a 12-year-old and below, by law they cannot consent. And those children are victims of sexual offenses. Even the other ones or above, obviously they could be. But automatically when you're talking about under 12s, we know that we have a serious problem there because nobody should be having sexual relations with a child under 12.
Is there any work done at any level to try and understand how many of these pregnancies result as the aftermath of a consensual sexual experience versus something which has been forced either by actual violence, the threat of violence, or the power imbalance that exists between older and younger people?
So, I mean, I haven't seen any statistics. I wouldn't be able to tell whether anybody is looking into it. But I would say that as a start, you will say that under 12 automatically it's sexual violence. You cannot say that a child consented. So that percentage already would mean that the law must kick in and families of those children must be engaged with in order to take the legal steps. Now, it also gets complicated because once you take the legal steps and report the cases, then there's the issue of the response of our justice system. So that is the category. And then with that, the category above that as well, it has to be that then the complainant and their family go and lay charges and are willing to go through that process. That's when you could be able to tell that for this percentage, these are the ones that are sexual offenses. I mean, I think that such a study should be undertaken, but you're going to have to rely a lot on families and parents being willing to come and actually open up and report these incidents.
It's the issue around your rights when it comes to sexual reproductive health and choice is complicated by the reality that many parts of South Africa are very conservative when it comes to issues of sexual freedom. and sexual choice. And it's all very well telling a 14, 15-year-old girl that under South African law she has the right to go to a clinic by herself and have a contraceptive prescribed to her. But for her to be able to do that in the kind of environment in which many of these girls live is, it's not a right that is in any way easy to make real for yourself.
I totally agree with you. I think over and over studies by, organizations working on that, and even when I did some work with, for instance, Love Life and United Nations Population Fund, the barriers were always coming out in relation to the fact that, even if the law says you are 14, you can access. When you go there, it's your aunt or your neighbor who's a nurse. You are scared about what they're going to say to your parents and all those things. But I want to maybe just take a bit of a step back and say that, the Minister of Education adopted the policy on prevention and management of learner pregnancy. And in that policy, they included provisions that are supposed to, when they at schools, see that there are incidents where a child needs to maybe access those reproductive services, or, for instance, even educate them about where to access them and comprehensive sexuality education. That was created as a bit of a buffer in a way that if the education system and, teachers and the people who are appointed in the school to give that support were able to then provide that, it will then buffer a bit for the learner who can directly go to a clinic. I don't think that is working properly in practice. There's also the integrated school health program. We'll have to go and look at whether those are still achieving what they meant to achieve. But certainly the clinics and working with the clinics, the facilities where services need to be accessed is one big barrier. Even as recent as now in January, I saw a study that says that that's still one of the biggest barriers that adolescents face.
See, it's in an environment where, I don't know, you're given very little help in establishing an identity for yourself, a sense of pride in yourself, a sense of dignity, a sense of a future which is going to be impacted by a pregnancy. You increase the chances that a 14 or 15-year-old is going to say, what the hell, let me do it because I'm going to get X out of it. I'm going to get better marks, or I'm going to benefit financially from it, and I have no future anyway. And that's again, I think, something which plays in. None of these things are single causal and therefore to be solved by a single solution. They're multi-causal, requiring multidisciplinary approaches. But that's another aspect. Somebody who genuinely believes that she has a future as a professional, as a business person, is going to take, I think, much greater effort to protect herself from a pregnancy which might interrupt progress towards that dream.
Well, I agree with you that it's a complicated social problem. And I think the lives of the young people, the children, and even what happens in schools, unfortunately, mirrors largely what we're struggling with as a society. And we as adults need to be asking ourselves those hard questions about how we're failing to give that child hope for themselves to believe that I can actually focus on education, and education can maybe get me to a point. We also need to engage with families. You talked about some of these things being transactional. There are challenges in that there are families where sometimes these things may be kind of allowed because there may be some financial benefits to the family. Then there's also instances where the family initially goes and lays a charge of a rape, and then you find that the judicial system is not great in responding. We had a lot of cases of a magistrate in KwaZulu-Natal who was saying families must settle among themselves and take money for it. So the system is broken on so many points for the child. And we cannot, one thing I totally agree with you, we cannot blame the children for our failures. And we need to actually start fixing it at those different points. But the how is the tricky part, because the socioeconomic circumstances are pushing people into allowing certain things to happen to their children. Our lack of comprehensive response when violence and sexual violence is reported is another one. The things that are happening in schools as well, if reports are done, then teachers move from one school to another if they are the violators. So you can already see how there's so many points where a girl child faces barriers and faces challenges that if we don't address those, we're going to continue to have these problems.
And for every one of those pregnant girls, there is an impregnating boy or man. Karabo Ozah, thank you very much for talking to us this afternoon, Director at the Centre for Child Law.